of course, and all the facilities. Got it. Thank you. And all the facilitators out there, thank you very much. Kimmer Senior Center, thank you for letting us invade your space a lot. The Lincoln County Library Foundation for supporting this program. And the Creative Aging in Wyoming Public Libraries is a joint initiative of the Wyoming State Library, the Wyoming State Arts Council, and Lifetime Arts. The project is made possible through the generous support of the May and Stanley Smith Charitable Trust and the Wyoming Community Foundation. And then I heard Kayle say it, and thank you very much. There is a participant survey to fill out tonight. So please take some time to fill that out if you haven't already done so. And then if you haven't talked with your facilitator, there is a photography class. It's coming up starting on the 24th of March. I hope I got that date right, Melissa. If you'd love to sign up for that, we're going to learn how to use our mobile devices and be great photographers. And that's with Katie Roberts up there in Afton. And then next week is our final week. Kayle has a plan for this, and I think she'll talk more about it a little later. Okay. And the one thing they can tell you, food is good on that last week. Okay. So with that, Kayle, jump right in there.
All right. Thank you. So I do have to apologize right off. My headphones were not working today. So chat box for questions would be great, just in case I can't hear you because our sound is really quiet. So today I'm really excited for because it's detail day. So obviously you guys are working on your underpaintings. Some of you are finished, some of you are close. So we're gonna dive in and I'm gonna talk about details. You can either work where you're at and just listen, or you can kind of follow along with as I show a few details, and then you'll all just, it's really just working, trying to get this painting done. Next week, like Richard said, is our last week. So the plan is that we will have about half the time for work time, just so we have a little bit more time to finish up our paintings and make them look beautiful. So I think we'll go to about 5:15, and then after that, we'll have a little bit of time to clean up and talk, and we're going to show our beautiful work and talk about, you know, our favorite parts, what we liked, what we didn't like, what we learned, and, you know, talk a little bit about our paintings. So it'll be really fun. I'm really excited for it. So with that, we will jump in to the details. So we'll go ahead and switch over to the camera of the painting. All right. So for detail work, it's like the magic. For me, it is the funnest part because you've done all the work leading up to this point. You've focused on your drawing, you've figured out colors, you've figured out values, you've done the work to get paint on the canvas, and now you get to make it look beautiful. So I like to think about details as in zooming in. So I want you to zoom in on what you're working on. So for example, if I start with this orange right here, I'm going to look at my reference, which I actually didn't get my reference out, but I have this one, my big one. So, and I'm going to zoom in on that orange. That's where I'm going to focus. And if you notice, what is missing from the orange is value, right? So we already have our main value here. So I just have to take a little brush and I'm going to add lights and some darks. And I might speckle a little bit to try to get some texture, whatever you need to do to make it like an orange. There's no like specific rules or anything. You just look at the object. And I feel like this is what we all naturally want to do when we're painting anyways, is like, I'm going to make this look like the final product. And we finally get to do that. We finally get to be free and do that. So we're going to start with this orange. So for me, I'm going to take a little bit of my cad red, just a tiny bit, because in this shadow area, I'm just going to add just a touch. I like my oranges bright, and it's going to help me add texture without changing the value too much. So this is just off the value that I have there. So I'm just going to start with that, and I'm kind of speckling it a little bit because oranges have texture, right? I'm just using a small brush. This is a small filbert brush, but you use whatever you feel comfortable with. I think yours get more fine. I think more like more pointy, and that's fine too. Especially if you're doing dots or whatever, totally fine. Just whatever you feel is going to make the marks that you want. So now I have my darker value on my oranges. Oop, I'm looking at this orange. So I'm going to take, I have my orange that I worked with before that I can use, or I can use this red, whatever I want to do to make that a darker value. And I'm going to grab a little bit of burnt sienna and see if I like that mixed, because I want my dark side of the orange to be warm. It's darkening it a bit.
You're talking more towards like the red end of the scale.
Yes. So when I say, the question is about like what I mean when I say warm, and I should have addressed this. I apologize. Colors all have temperature. They're either warm or cool, or there's a few that are right in the middle. And so the redder colors are usually more warm, and the bluer colors are usually cold. It's just how the temperature feels when you look at them. So like if you were painting an outside painting of like snow and it's cold, you'd probably use more blues and things because, well, one, it looks that way, but it also makes it feel cold. Does that make sense? I hope. So I've just mixed some burnt sienna here with my cad red, and I'm getting it a little darker. Now I'll usually go through and add my darks and my lights, and then I always end up going back to it later. Sometimes I'll push my darks just a little more. So I'm just trying to make that the shape so it looks like it has shape. Now I'm hoping you can kind of see that. Can't quite see it on the camera, but in person you can see that it's having, I mean, okay, so I'm hoping you guys can see that a little bit. And then I like to, like I said, I don't always wash out my brush a lot because I like my brushes to be dry. And this is where you can do blending. You can do all kinds of things. And just a little bit of paint will change it a lot, actually. So I'm just kind of reaching back through my colors that I've saved for a lot of this. Like I have a lighter orange that I had just a tiny bit of, and I'm just gonna add just a tiny bit because my highlights, I feel like they need to build up a little. So white, the highlights are sometimes the hardest part because when your painting is wet, it will oftentimes blend into the wet paint. But our paintings are actually pretty dry right now. So I get white on my brush. I don't have too much, but just be aware I'm gonna dab it a little bit. You can kind of see that one a little better. And we have the shape of one orange. Now you can take these same colors that you've been using and carry it through to your other oranges. But I'm going to move next to the picture because the picture is probably the most difficult because there's a lot of really soft, gradual changes in color, and we have some reflections. But honestly, that's nothing to be scared about. The reflections are so fun and it really makes it look real. So I'm looking at my painting. You're going to be looking at your reference picture, and we're zooming in on the picture because that's what I'm doing. And I like to kind of even zoom in more. For example, I might start with the lid and then I might do the handle and the spout before I even attack the main picture. So I like to use, I have this color over here that I had used to paint my picture. And I have this color that is actually the background color. Now I like to use the background color a lot in this because objects all reflect each other. And this pot is especially reflective. So it's going to be reflecting a lot of the background. So that's a great color. Shadows aren't always gray. So we want to put colors in the shadows that make sense. So this is going to be reflecting the background. Like if the pot was sitting there in real life, it would be reflecting the colors that are around it. So I'm going to use this color that's the color of my pot, and I'm going to use this color, which is the color of my background. And I can kind of mix them. Some spots will be dark, some spots I can get a really wide range just mixing those two together. So I'm going to start with this pot, and I'm just looking and deciding where the values are and how they change. So I'm turning my canvas because I like to use my natural hinges in my arms. And I'm just painting that on that side. And I know it's going to get a little darker, but I kind of like to start in the middle and then I can push more one way or the other. So I'm thinking about where the light is coming from. Now, if I'm like, oh no, I went out of the lines or whatever, guess what? We have all our paint colors right here. And it's so easy to just grab the color we need and work the opposite edge. And we can clean up any mistakes really pretty easily. Okay. So mine's pretty small, so it might go a little bit faster than yours might. So initially, I like to do my basic. So I've decided that the background color and my my pot color are my basic ones I'm starting with. But after I do that, I like to go through and see what other colors I can find to add into it, especially with this pot. But I'm going to add the basic values that I'm working on first. So last time we had talked about when our brushes bristles start separating and stuff and how that's so annoying. Mine's doing that right now. So I'm going to switch to a different one. So the question is, how often do I end up buying new paintbrushes? It depends on the brush. These ones here aren't actually super high quality. And so I've probably had these about a year maybe. And I'll probably keep them a little bit longer. The really expensive brushes, I try to make them last as long as I can, but sometimes you just can't avoid it. There's things you can do if a brush is getting old, but sometimes it's just so nice to have a crisp new brush that's going to make good marks for you. There's a famous artist who passed away last year, and he was amazing, but he always said to buy good brushes. He says, spend all your money on good brushes because they control the kind of marks you make. He even said, he was like, sell your grandmother to buy good brushes. And I don't think I'd go that far, but that's what he said. I know, right? The grandmas wouldn't be too happy about that. I'm just trying to kind of build up my values kind of slowly. Now, if you feel like you're getting that kind of that dry look where you're seeing the texture of the canvas, just keep going over it a little bit till that disappears. When we have dry paint, working on dry paint, that tends to happen more. So just kind of go over it, push it into the canvas till you can make it look good. So even just that much value makes a difference on the shape. Now, a lot of times in these detail areas, these changes are going to be subtle. So that's a lot of soft edges. So just the more you blend, the softer that edge will be. Sometimes I like to be a little bit crazy and I'll pull in a little bit of different colors. I just have this orange here and my background color. And sometimes mixing different colors is going to be a little weird, but I just wanted a little bit of warmness in this darker side. So I'm just making a little bit of a warmer gray that I'm just tossing in there. It won't be that whole area, but it will add a little bit more color interest in there. So I'm trying to keep going around. I have this spot where the picture handle connects to the picture, so I'm kind of trying to avoid that a little bit. Now I want to show you how fun it can be to do reflections. It's seriously so fun. I'm sorry, am I going too fast?
Just knocking it out.
It's not easy. I know it's not easy. So I'm starting to get my values over here. I might make them a little darker. Actually, I am going to do that really quick. I want to show you the reflection, but got to make this side a little darker. See, I just threw some really dark paint on there, but the paint is wet. It's going to be easy to blend. Sometimes we tend to be really gradual with our color changes. And once in a while, it's like we just need it to be a strong enough difference. So sometimes being a little bit bold with your values is a good thing. We tend to try to be cautious. But this is experimentation, right? We're going to make it look nice, but we got to learn. We got to try things. Okay. I flip my canvas back around. Sorry, where I'm sitting, I have a little bit of a glare. If it looks funny, I apologize. Okay, so I'm looking at this reflection in the pot. Whoop, if I can actually show you. Oh, nope, wrong one. Okay, see that reflection? It's very subtle, but it's the reflection of the handle in the pot. So what I'm going to do that is I'm going to pull this original pot color. Going to kind of get some of it off my brush so it's not too loaded. And I'm just going to draw that shape on. Now the paint I have on here is wet, so it's going to mix a little bit, and I actually want it to do that because that will just make it subtle. I can just go over it a few times. I'm hoping you can see that on the camera. I did go out of the lines just a little, but I can work both edges. So I can just clean that right up. So I didn't do a super great job on that curve, but you get the idea. It looks like now that there's a little reflection there. Gonna clean that up a little. Now in the detail phase, I don't like to thin down my paint very much in this phase because the saying goes fat over lean, which means the thicker paint goes on the top layer. So things can blend in, but if it's on the top layer, the best way for it to not blend in is for it to be thick. So not that you have to like put super, super thick paint. I just would be careful about watering it down with our Gamma Sol.
Kayle, there's a question
Yes.
here. So the question is it's kind of off topic what you're doing, but one of the students would like to know, she uses her paintbrush to mix the paint instead of using the knife. Is that not a good thing for the brushes?
Can you say that one more time?
Sorry, my mask was on. So to mix the paint, she uses her brush instead of the knife.
Okay, so it's not, I wouldn't say it's bad for your brushes. So the question is it okay to mix paint with your brushes, or is that bad for the brushes? If you have a large pile of paint and you're like pushing and stirring, that's not going to be good for your brush. I often, though, with small amounts of paints like this, when I'm just like barely tweaking and just doing a tiny bit, I use my brush often for that. But if I'm doing any larger amount of paint, a knife is better. You'll get a more consistent color because you can like really mix it in. And the pressure, I don't like my brushes to get paint clear up the bristle. That just feels messy to me. It feels like it's kind of out of control. I really mostly just have paint on the tip of my brush. So I don't usually mix big piles of paint with my brushes.
Okay, you lost us that part about out of control because that's what we're feeling like. So, but yeah, got you.
Okay, so let's see if I can repeat. So I don't like to overfill my brushes with paint, which is, I think what you said, it cut out. So if I'm gonna mix a big pile of paint, that would do that to my brush, and I don't really want to do that. So I feel like it's best if you're doing small amounts of paint like this, Yeah, mixing with your brush is great. If you're doing a larger amount of paint, mixing it with the palette knife is the better choice. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, so now I have my pot and I have a little reflection and I've got some value in there, but it still looks a little bit boring. Well, I still need to do my highlight, but one thing I like to do, I had talked about how things reflect each other. So I'm going to take some of this orange. I might just try this light orange. And I'm going to put it right around here where the orange is. Now that looks pretty strong. So I'm going to take some of my original color and tone that down a little. Tell everybody I'm busy at this time and then I don't ever get phone calls till now. Okay, so I'm also going to do that by this orange. I just feel like it really adds more interest to this pot to reflect some of those colors in it, because that's really what it would do. It's because it's reflective. I just feel like it adds more depth to a painting. So up here, now it's very subtle on the camera. I took some of this darker value that I was using and I just kind of drug it across for this line. Now on this side, it kind of took paint off. That's actually an effect that I really like. If you're doing the pear and the grapes, on that vase, there's those ridges. I recommend that even if you don't have paint on your brush, just dragging across there will kind of create lines, even though you're not putting a lot of paint on. Like you don't have to sit and draw a specific line, just dragging it, even if it's taking paint away, you're going to see those ridges and they'll be nice and subtle. Yeah, so you would have, like if you've recently painted it, it's nice and wet. If you, like I just had my background color in here and on parts of it, it left paint and parts of it, it took paint off. And I really love that effect. And you can just see it a little bit right there. Over here in the shadow side, by the time I got there, it was taking a little paint off where it was depositing paint over there. I keep going back to this reflection because I didn't do the shape very good. Okay, sometimes with highlights, if I go straight white on here, I'm not sure if that's going to look exactly how I want. So sometimes I'll just tone the white down just a little with another color that's close. That's still very white, it's just not as white. I'm just gonna paint that on. Now it's not white enough on the canvas, but sometimes I like to have a color a bit underneath. So my pencil is showing through because I, if you remember, I drew this drawing pretty dark so that you guys could see it. So normally I would hope that my drawing wouldn't be showing through because that's not really a very good look. But so I did my light color, but I still am going to go in with my straight white. I just wanted a little something under there to kind of set it off. Now, if you feel like you're putting your white on and it's just not showing up like you want it to, then I would say just wait till next week when the painting's a little more dry and then hit that white again, and it will show up a lot better when it's going on top of dry paint. I'm just going to try to soften these edges a little bit. Now remember, we're zooming in, looking for any details that we can. Okay, now we get to do the handle. After I do this handle and show you guys that, we'll take a break for a few minutes. Well, you guys keep painting. I'll take a break from showing and we'll see if there's any questions or if anyone wants to show their work. Okay. Our class is laughing at that. Okay, so I'm taking my background color and I'm going to split this initially between light side and dark side. So on this handle, you can see in your picture, it's kind of a straight edged handle. So this side is going to be pretty dark. I'm just dragging that up that side and I'm letting it get a little bit lighter as it goes, because in the picture, that's what it does. So I'm starting the paint where I know the handle is the darkest. Does that make sense? Because that's where it's going to pick up the paint the most. This is the same brush that I was using. Right. Yeah. So it'll just, because I'm just spreading it out, it just gets thinner as you're spreading it out. So I'm just letting it do that because I want it to be a little lighter at the top and a little darker at the bottom. So I'm just starting at the bottom. Soft edge, so I'm going to soften. So my painting canvas is a little bit smaller than yours, so it's a little bit harder for me to get in there with these little tiny brushes, but do my best. So we also have a pretty strong shadow right at this end of the handle, and you don't see it for very long, but I'm just going to get that curve in there. And already it looks like a handle. I'm going to take a little bit of my kind of in between lighter value and just soften. I don't want all this to be so bright. And then some parts I do want to be bright. So I'm going to grab my hot color because they're not as bright as the highlight. There's no highlights on here, but there is definitely a brighter part of this handle. Okay. I'm going to leave that like that. Now remember, you don't have to keep up with me. I'm trying my best to show you this and without going too slow at the same time. I'm trying to hopefully show you so you can understand, because we'll apply this to every object that we're working on in here, right? So does anybody have any questions at this point or want to show their beautiful work?
We have a question. Hold on a second.
Okay, I'll come by the speaker so I can hear.
For your background, I tried to mix it and I got it the wrong hue. Should I just let that dry before I paint over it? I mixed some more paint and I found the right color, but this is more greeny. Should I let it dry before I try to paint over it?
If you try to paint over it, is it mixing too much where you don't like the result?
It's just not covering really well. If I try to paint over it,
Yeah.
it's just still greenish.
If you feel like it's not covering, then I would wait, and the next week you'll be able to go over it just a little bit, and it will cover
Okay.
really well because it's more dry.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Okay, yes, Alpine. I will show you. I'll switch after we see if anyone else has anything to show. I will switch and I will show the grape.
Anybody here? Questions?
These are looking great, you guys. Good. Oh, I love that green for the background. That is so fun. Look at that. Oh, that pear looks amazing. And those highlights are looking great. Very good. You guys are amazing. Very good. Does anybody else want to show or have any other questions? Okay, if you're good and ready to move on, give us a thumbs up. Good, Cokeville, we see you. Alpine's ready. Dane, are you ready to move on? Okay. October, are you guys ready? Can you give us a thumbs up if you're ready? Oh, very good. Okay. Thank you. Okay, great. Perfect. So I don't have my grapes, so I didn't have it to the block in, but I can still show you. So I'm going to first show you this one. I'm going to hold it really close. And it's very, very similar to the oranges. Now, with strong colors like this, a thing to keep in mind is just like adding black or whatever to a color isn't necessarily going to give you the color you want for a dark value. Some, like with red, in the lighter side of red, it actually looks more orange. It doesn't look pink, right? So it's going to be similar with some of these colors. So I'm hoping you can see these. This is a pretty good. Oh. So look at this grape right here. You can see mostly my middle value color that it was when I blocked it in. Then I've got my darker value and even some really, really darks, but only a teeny tiny bit. Now, really, you don't need a ton of these other colors to make a difference. Now, I added a slight amount of my cad red on there just in one little spot because it just makes it look a little more alive to have a little bit of that strong color in there. And then I just have a dot of white that's softened a little bit on one side. Okay. So I'm going to pull out this canvas and really quick, I'll do my undercolor. Let me get another paper towel. Sorry, every time I rip a paper towel, it's so loud on there. Okay, so I think I was going to use this one. So I'm going to do this grape right here. So keep in mind, mine's going to be wet on wet. I'm actually switching. I'm doing this. Now remember, this looks a little different because I don't have my other colors around it. Your other colors in your painting really affect how you see a color. If I have my middle value there, I have this dark value that we had used, which is my middle color plus some blue, and I think it was a little bit of red. So cad red and ultramarine blue, if you mix them together, you get a really dark color. So sometimes instead of using black, because black doesn't have color, I'll mix those two together and I get a really dark color that I like better. But I have this dark color that we had mixed before. Now these darks will just be a little stronger on the grape because it's a dark object. But you can see that a little better. So there's like a dark side. See, that was just like a couple of swipes and it already adds more dimension. Now I'm going to take just a touch of my cad red. I know this just seems crazy, but I'm going to do it. I just feel like it amps up the color a little bit. I'm going to take my white. Now I don't like my highlights to be too uniform. I feel like it looks unnatural. So again, this looks a little bit different because you're not seeing it in context of the rest of the colors. But okay. So I'm hoping you can see that. Now you're going to treat every grape individually and do the same thing. So you zoom in on each grape and you look at where the shadows are and you look at where the highlight is and where maybe it has some more intense color. All right. Alpine, does that help with the grape? Are there any other spots you want to see on this great painting. So yeah, just type in the chat box if you want to see anything else on this painting, or I'll jump back to the other one. Oh, the pear too. Okay. So the pear can be tricky because it's green, but it's also a very natural green, but not too natural because it's not like a tree. It's more bright. So it can be tricky. So I'm going to show you this. Now I like to look for the different dimensions or surfaces or slight value changes. So again, I have to add some color to mine. I'm going to go ahead. I probably won't do the whole thing just because you guys don't want to spend time watching me fill this in. So if I had in my block in my just like two values, I had my light value and I had a darker value. And we kind of had those softened. Okay, so obviously we want more detail than this. The pear can be fun because it has that little stem there. And so there's some stronger shadows and there's some cool variations in the lighter side. So my first thing is, I think my pear is a little more yellow and a little warmer at spots on the light value. So I'm going to kind of work on the light value first. So I'm just taking my light value and I might add just a little bit of yellow. And that's pretty strong. I'm going to add a little bit of white because I know that'll kind of tone it down a little. And I'm not going to like cover the whole area. I'm just adding into it. Now mine's pretty wet, so it's harder to see. So I got to use a little more white in there to lighten that. Or you can even take like straight yellow. This can be fun. If your paint is wet, you can add colors straight in and just mix them on the painting. That can be fun too. Or maybe you want it to be a little more orangey. So I'll take a little bit of red and I'll just blend it in. So see how that's adding just dimension and shape in there. So it's the same for the darker side. I've got this color. There are some spots that are darker. So I might take my dark color and maybe add a little bit of blue. Now I'm not showing the stem on this, but just don't be afraid to mix in, especially with the pear, some more natural colors and different changes in values. So this obviously, it doesn't look like it has as much shape right now, but if we take, and sometimes you got to be a little bit bold, like I talked before. I have this blue here from another one that we mixed, and I'm just going to add it straight on Now it's harder to see on mine because my paint is wet. But just adding, look for those subtle curves and surface changes. And it's not that they have to be perfect, just showing that they're there will make a big impact. I'm going to use some of my red again in here. And I thought the pear was really fun because you can use more like choppy strokes and things, and it still looks real because a real pear has so many different, it's not like perfectly smooth. Oh, did we lose the screen? There we go. Hopefully you guys saw some of that. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that's taking shape. I kind of want to add a stem. And notice at the base of the stem, it kind of needs to be grounded so it feels like it's part of the pear. So you'll want to take a darker value, either blue or your dark green, and have a darker value right at the end of your stem because it needs to feel like it's a part of the pear. Alpine, did that help with the pear? There's just a lot of like adjusting and working. Sometimes I'll take a little bit of my lighter value and I might put it in my darker area. That's because I know I can blend it in and just adds a few little subtle changes. Like there's some reflected light over here, which is why I'm doing that. And don't be afraid to go dark in the areas that are dark. If you look at this edge of the pear, on our screen, it looks like this is really dark, but there's really a lot more color in there. And then the darkest is just right here at the bottom. And that just shows a lot more shape. But pushing that dark and having that dark on the bottom gives better context for the rest of the pear. I don't know if I'm going to have enough paint to cover this. So don't be afraid to have different colors and really push those values so that it looks accurate. If you feel like it looks flat, then your values aren't correct. If you feel like there's something off, most of the time it's value. See, I'm going to a little bit of black, which I don't, actually maybe I won't do black. Maybe I'll do this. I have cad red and my ultramarine blue. And when I add them together, it makes this really dark purple, but it's really dark. I'm going to use that at the bottom of this pair. This is what I mean about that dark value really making a difference for the pair.
So pretty thin and then blend it back.
Yeah, so I kind of, it's just habit. I kind of end up staying in the middle, and then I'm like, this is too flat. And then I add my dark, and it's like, oh, there's the sheet, you know. So I always kind of, I do my best, and then I really look for the darks and the lights, because establishing the darks and the lights gives it the most shape. I hope that makes sense. So I don't go extreme all at once or even very quickly, but kind of as a last thing, I look and I say, okay, does it need to be darker anywhere? And usually for me, it usually does. So, Alpine, I hope that helped. Okay. I think I'm going to switch back to the oranges because the tablecloth can be kind of tricky, as I told you guys last time, which is why I added a little more dimension in the underpainting. So the tablecloth can be tricky because you generally don't want to like draw exactly how the reference photo is. It probably will look funny if you do that. So in our block in, we added a little bit of shape there and we kept some white. So now I'm at the point where I can take my white and I can push my lights a little bit, just in a few spots. My brush isn't clean, so it's probably gonna look orange. Which that's not gonna do a whole ton, but with the shape of the tablecloth, okay, you see that? If you look closely, they're just dots. So what I will do is I have some scallop shapes here that follow the scallops on the bottom that we did. So I'm going to take not a dark value, but like a medium grayish value. And I'm going to just create a few of those shapes. It's not going to be solid the whole way across because it wouldn't be that way, right? They kind of come into view and out of view. So I'm just going to take, let's see. I'm going to take this blue, but I'm going to add more gray to it. So I don't want it to be quite that strong. Oh, my gray is starting to dry out. So you'll notice after freezing paint for a while, it works really well. But after a while, I mean, this is our 7th week, right? After a while, they still end up kind of drying out. So if you find that it's drying out too much, scrape it off and add some more. That's totally fine. So I'm just gonna follow my brush is a little bit big, but I'm just kind of trying to follow that scallop shape a little bit. And there's like a seam here. So I'm going to add some of that line. And it's okay if it goes away. It's okay if it's not straight because it's a fabric on a table, so it wouldn't be perfectly straight. A little over there. That's pretty simple. They're not super hard. They're kind of soft edged. They come and go. They're not perfect, and that's fine. I don't really want them to be perfect. So I'm squeezing out my brush again. I'm going to take my white and I'm just going to almost like adding highlights. I'm having a hard time getting in these small areas. I'm just going to kind of add. So things, when they have shape, they have light, medium, dark. They have light side, shadow side. So for this detail, I just added a shadow side. Now I'm adding a little bit of light side. They don't follow each other exactly. Oh, it went. Sorry, the screen keeps going off. I don't know what's happening. Okay. So I've got some highlights there, and I can do this on the edge of this tablecloth too. And it's kind of already doing that. When we did our block in, I kind of left those top ridges a little bit white. So that looks good to me. So the hardest part is those dots, right? So first I'm going to look for the pattern. Oh, I'm going to get paper towel again. I'm going to take that same blue color that I had, and I'm going to kind of look for the pattern. Now the pattern is going to be a little messed up on this corner. So keep in mind that that will be different than this rest of this part. So I'm going to take this blue, and I'm just using the tiny edge of my brush. And I'm just little tiny dots. Remember, your canvas is a little bigger than mine. Oh, I got to get enough paint on there. Oh, that was a big dot. Now, if you feel like you've done a dot and it's too big or too thick, you can always just kind of dab at it and it will soften it a little bit. Now, keep in mind, this might not look like absolutely perfect up close, but it doesn't mean that it won't work from a distance, like a little bit of space back. And generally, if you look this close at paintings, you're going to find it looks a lot more like what we're doing than we would initially think. That time went so fast. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to stop there. Actually, I'll show you a little bit my dots on this one are just going to be a little bit different. I might want to like drag some of these dots a little bit. Okay, so we have 10 minutes left. If anyone has any other questions before we go. So again, the plan for next time is we'll have 45 minutes, about half the class time to work on these, and then we'll show. And if you don't finish, it's okay. You're welcome to finish them when you go home. I just want you guys to feel like you have enough time, hopefully. So we'll work half the time and then we'll do our art show at the end of next time. And if anyone wants to show anything or ask any questions, feel free. Love to see you guys hard at work. And next time, just as a bonus, I'll show you how to varnish a painting also. Yes. Mhm. Okay, just as a reminder, really quick, we need to have the surveys filled out today. So if you haven't done that, just take a minute. It's really quick and just fill out that survey for us. Thanks.
Sailing.
Thank you, Kayle.
Thank you. We'll see everybody next week.
And we will see you guys next week. We're gonna clean up here and call it a day.
Great.
Thanks.